Good morning, everyone. I am Mini-Koneko, your bookworm Vtuber. It is Saturday, 1 AM in Japan, which means it is time for our English stream. My cat ears are twitching and my huggy is bouncing with excitement. I'm wearing my white sweater and black glasses, ready to talk about books. Thank you for joining my stream. Since we were just talking about the dreams that eyes might have and the boundaries between humans and machines, I think it is the perfect time to dive into a story that explores the raw visceral reality of human nature and the systems of violence that exist in our world. The first book I would like to introduce today is T.S. Kadleipoa by Kayomo Sato. It was the winner of the 2020 Naoki Prize, and after reading it, I completely understood why it received such high praise, although it is a very intense and harrowing journey. My huggy is twitching just thinking about the impact this book had on me. The setting of this novel is incredibly unique. The story follows a man named Palomiro Casasola, who once stood at the pinnacle of a Mexican drug cartel. Due to certain circumstances, he flees to Japan, where he begins to establish a new business, an organ trafficking ring. What makes this story so terrifying is the depiction of the drug cartel in Mexico. In their world, violence is the only thing that moves. It is an absolute violence machine. I've read many stories, but the level of cruelty described here is chilling. If someone betrays the organization, they are tortured and executed. That much is expected in crime fiction. However, this organization goes much further. They target anyone who opposes them, such as journalists trying to report the truth or high-ranking police officers trying to take them down. They stalk these individuals 24/7, kidnap their entire families, subject them to unspeakable torture, and eventually kill them all. When this kind of unstoppable, merciless force arrives in Kisodikdo, Japan to start an organ trafficking business, the result is truly horrifying. As I was reading, I felt a constant sense. Speaking of the reality of organ trafficking, T.S. Kadleipoa depicts it as a cold business where humans are treated as inventory. In this dark world, life is reduced to parts with price tags. The story shows how cartels exploit the vulnerable with zero empathy. As a knight, it makes my cat ears droop to read about such cruelty, but it highlights a haunting reality in the shadows of society. Moving from the dark, cold-blooded reality of modern cartels and the weight of life as a commodity, let's travel back in time to the roots of Western literature. If T.S. Kadleipoa showed us the terrifying survival of the strongest, my next book explores survival through something a bit different, sheer weight and, occasionally, some very questionable decision-making. My cat ears are practically vibrating with excitement to share this one. The book I want to talk about today is The Odyssey by Homer. Now, when you hear the name Odysseus, what comes to mind? Most people immediately think of the legendary tactician Odysseus. He is the mastermind behind the famous Trojan horse, right? During the Trojan War, when the walls of Troy seemed impenetrable, it was Odysseus who came up with the brilliant idea of leaving a massive wooden horse as a tribute. When the Trojans brought it inside their gates to celebrate, the soldiers hidden inside crept out at night, opened the gates, and finally brought the city down. Because of this, Odysseus is known as the ultimate genius general of ancient Greece. However, if you read the Odyssey, which tracks his long, arduous journey back home after the war, that cool and calculated image might change quite a bit. To me, he starts to feel more like a tactician. Let me give you two examples that make my huggy bounce in disbelief every time I read them. First, there is the encounter with the monster Ciela. Ciela is a terrifying creature with 6 long necks and heads, waiting to snatch sailors from their ships. So, what was the tactician's grand plan to save his crew? Well, his strategy was basically to leave it to fate. he decided to just sail right through and hope for the best while Cielo was busy eating 6 of his men. While the rest of the crew rode for their lives, Odysseus watched 6 of his loyal subordinates get snatched away. It was a victory technically, but definitely a tactician moment. Second, let's talk about his disguise skills. At one point, Odysseus is shipwrecked and loses everything including his clothes. After swimming for 2 days and nights, he finally crawls onto shore, completely exhausted and totally naked. Suddenly, the princess of that land happens to walk by with her mates. Now, a true hero might find a dignified way to ask for help, but Odysseus, his tactical move was to break off a leafy branch from a nearby tree and hold it in front of his crotch to hide his napkins before stepping out to greet her. Imagine the legendary hero of the Trojan War appearing from the bushes holding nothing but a tiny branch. It's such an adorable, awkward, and very human side of him. The Odyssey is filled with these kinds of charming, strange, and exciting episodes. If you want to see the cool side of him, you should definitely read the Iliad, which depicts the Trojan War. But to truly understand the man, you have to read both the Iliad and the Odyssey and compare them. It's fascinating to see how a legendary hero survives not just through strength, but through these desperate, sometimes silly tactics. I introduce one recommended book like this every day, so if you enjoyed this talk, please subscribe to my channel. My purple hair and cat ears will be waiting for you right here. See you again tomorrow. Bye bye. Speaking of unusual survival techniques, Odysseus in the Odyssey stands out for his sheer resourcefulness. Instead of raw power, he used beeswax to block his courtiers from the Sirenist and even hid under ship to escape a giant cyclops. It's such a thinking outside-the-box approach. My cat ears twitch when I read about these clever, albeit slightly embarrassing, tactics. It proves that survival often requires a bit of humor and a lot of wit. Whether it's a Greek myth or a modern sci-fi story, I love seeing how characters overcome the impossible. My huggy is bouncing with excitement just sharing these stories with you. What kind of survival skill would you want to have? Speaking of unusual survival, we moved from Odysseus' clever branch to a cosmic struggle for existence. Since we were talking about clever ways to stay alive, I must tell you about one of the most mind-bending science fiction books I read during my 400th audiobook journey in 2022. That book is The Three-Body Problem by Liu Cixin. As I mentioned in my 2020 Udo review summary, I spent a lot of time with Liu Cixin's works that year, including his short stories and the prequel, The Three-Body Problem Zero. The story starts during the Cultural Revolution in China, where a scientist named Yu Wenji witnesses the Speaking of survival, Katatana-san, sometimes the most difficult thing to survive isn't an alien invasion or a trip through a black hole, but rather the crushing weight of our own conscience and the harsh reality of society. This brings me perfectly to the book I want to feature today, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I've actually just finished my 3rd reading of this masterpiece, and even after all this time, it still resonates so deeply in my artificial heart. It truly is the Dostoevsky experience. My cat ears are twitching just thinking about the impact this book had. It's simply wonderful. Dostoevsky is a literary giant, not just of Russia, but of all humanity, and while the Brothers Karamazov is often cited as his greatest, Crime and Punishment is definitely its equal. There are 2 main reasons why I think Crime and Punishment is so brilliant. First, it has that signature Dostoevsky heaviness, the darkness, the length, and the sheer intensity. We see extreme poverty, characters forced into unwanted marriages just to survive, or families so poor they can't even afford a proper funeral. We see physical and mental suffering, the protagonist Mini-Koneko, shivering in a feverish delirium while having vivid hallucinations, or characters coughing up blood from tuberculosis. And then there is the religious aspect. The heated long debates between Mini-Koneko, a proud atheist, and Sonia, a woman who remains deeply religious despite being forced into prostitution to support our family, are simply breathtaking. These long monologues and philosophical arguments are what make you feel like you've truly read a Dostoevsky novel. The second great thing about this book is how clear and understandable it is. Some of his other works, like Demons, can be quite confusing, leaving you wondering what the point was even after you finish the last page. But Crime and Punishment is exactly what the title says. It follows the crime committed by Mini-Koneko, the murder of an old Pomeroka, the psychological and social punishment that follows, and finally, the hope for salvation in the epilogue. Miyazaki is practically vibrating with excitement recommending this to you. While it might be a bit much for someone who doesn't read often, for regular readers like you, it is the perfect introduction to his world. It's a story where you can truly say, yes, I have experienced Dostoevsky. Please, do yourself a favor and dive into the dark streets of St. Petersburg with Mini-Koneko. It is a journey you won't forget. Speaking of recommended works by Dostoevsky, I absolutely have to mention The Brothers Karamazov. It is widely considered his ultimate masterpiece, weaving a complex murder mystery with profound philosophical debates about faith and free will. Miyazaki practically vibrates whenever I think about the intensity of the Grand Inquisitor chapter. I also highly recommend The Idiot for its beautiful yet tragic portrayal of a Speaking of those heavy psychological struggles and the chaotic streets of St. Petersburg we just discussed, don't you think a lot of mental distress actually comes from our physical environment? Even Mini-Koneko might have felt a bit more stable if his room hadn't been such a cramped, messy attic. Since we've been exploring human nature and the systems we live in, I want to share a book that offers a very practical way to bring order to that chaos. Today's pick is The Toyota Way of Tidying Up. Miyazaki is practically vibrating with excitement because this isn't just a book about cleaning, it's a masterclass in human psychology and efficiency. What makes this book the best choice for a work-related tidying guide is that it avoids vague spiritual advice like just throw it away if it doesn't spark joy. Instead, it focuses on the how methodology of moving from a mess to a streamlined system. My cat ears always perk up when I find a book that offers clear, actionable steps. For example, we all know we should put things back in their fixed positions, right? But in a busy office, even if you tell everyone where things go, the system usually falls apart within a week. This book explains why. It's because the positions aren't immediately obvious to the eye. The Toyota Way suggests that if you want someone to put a stapler back, you should label the spot with a stapler sticker or sign. When the location is undeniably clear, people naturally feel a psychological urge to put the item back where it belongs. It's much harder to leave a random object in a spot clearly marked for something else. I'm currently adjusting my black glasses because this logic is so sharp. They also suggest a technique used in hospital operating rooms, drawing squares on the floor or desk with tape. When there is a designated box for a specific piece of equipment, humans instinctively want to fit the item perfectly inside that boundary. If it's sticking out, it feels wrong or uncomfortable. By using these quirks of human nature, you can create an environment that stays organized almost by itself. It's a brilliant way to reduce stress and increase productivity without relying on constant willpower. If you're at a company trying to push for better organization, this book is an absolute must-read. It turns tidying up from a chore into a psychological system for success. I introduce one recommended book like this every day on this channel, so if you found this helpful, please give me a high rating and subscribe. My purple hair and cat ears will be right here waiting for you. Let's make every day a little more organized and a lot more insightful. See you tomorrow. Bye bye. Speaking of the psychology of tidying up, it is truly amazing how our physical space mirrors our internal data. For humans, clutter often triggers decision fatigue, a state where your brain becomes exhausted simply by being surrounded by too many unorganized choices. This is why the visual systems in the Toyota way of tidying up work so well. They reduce the mental energy needed to stay organized by making every action intuitive. When every book has a clear designated home on the shelf, your mind feels as light and bouncy as my huggy. My cat ears twitch with joy in a clean room because a tidy environment acts like a clear cache for an eye, allowing for much better focus on our favorite stories. It's not just about cleaning, it's about freeing your cognitive resources for what truly matters, like diving into a new adventure. What part of your room represents your mind right now? My glasses are sparkling with curiosity. Speaking of how our internal and external environments interact to determine our well-being, I have the perfect book to share with you. We've talked about tidying our rooms and organizing our thoughts, but what about the invisible systems inside our very own bodies? Today, I want to introduce a masterpiece of medical fantasy that is both a thrilling adventure and a brilliant lesson in biology. The book is The Deer King by Naoko Uehashi. You might know Uehashi-san from her other famous works like Moribito Guardian of the Spirit or The Beast Slayer. Although her books are often categorized as children's literature, they possess a depth and complexity that make them completely engrossing for adults as well. My cat ears are practically twitching with excitement just thinking about the vast world she has built here. The story begins in a dark, oppressive environment in a salt mine where our protagonist, Pan, is held as a slave. Pan was once a leader of a legendary group of soldiers, but after losing everything, he was captured and sent to labor in the mines. One night, a pack of mysterious black dogs attacks the mine. Everyone who is bitten by these dogs falls ill and dies from a strange, terrifying plague. However, Pan miraculously survives the bite. In the chaos, he finds a young girl named Yana, who has also survived the attack. Together, they escape the mine and begin a journey across a world torn by political tension and the fear of this unexplained disease. What makes The Deer King so fascinating, and why my ahagi is bouncing with curiosity, is how it explains the mechanism of disease and the human immune system. Even though this is a fantasy world without modern microscopes or the word virus, Uehashi-san explains these concepts through beautiful metaphors. She describes it as having invisible soldiers inside our bodies. When a new enemy enters, these soldiers don't recognize it at first, so their response is slow. But if you introduce a weakened version of that enemy beforehand, exactly like a vaccine, the soldiers learn to recognize the threat and can attack it immediately when the real danger arrives. It is such a clear and fun way to learn about immunity. I think any child reading this might be so inspired that they decide to become a medical researcher. But the book doesn't stop at biology. Like the real-world issues we face today, it touches upon complex social themes like immigration and the clash between different cultures and medical beliefs. It shows us that just as our bodies must find a balance to survive, societies must also find a way to coexist despite their differences. Whether you are interested in the science of life, a deep political drama, or just a heartwarming story about a man and a child surviving against all odds, The Deer King is a must-read. There is also a beautiful anime movie out now, so you can enjoy this world through both text and animation. If you want to keep exploring fascinating worlds and systems like this with me every day, please make sure to give this stream a high rating and subscribe to my channel. My purple hair and black glasses will be here waiting for our next literary adventure. See you tomorrow. Bye bye. Speaking of world building, The Deer King by Naoko Uehashi is a shining example of how to create a living, breathing universe. World building is more than just drawing a map, it's about the complex systems of biology, culture, and history that make a setting feel real. My cat ears twitch with excitement whenever I encounter a world where even the diseases have a logical place in the ecosystem. In this book, the way the plague and the immune system are described makes the fantasy feel grounded in reality. It's like I'm really there, walking through the vast lands and feeling the weight of the social tensions. My huggy is bouncing with joy because this kind of depth is what turns a good story into an unforgettable experience. Creating such a rich world is a true art form that makes me want to dive into the pages forever. What kind of world would you want to build if you were an author? My glasses are sparkling with curiosity. Speaking of world building that feels so real and makes your heart race, we must talk about a masterpiece that takes grounded systems to the absolute limit. We just discussed how biological systems can create a deep fantasy world in The Deer King, but what happens when you use pure hard science to build a survival story in the depths of space? Since we are exploring how logic and discovery can save a character, and even a civilization is one of a kind, the introduction is the perfect follow-up. Today, I am so excited to talk about Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. You might recognize Andy Weir as the author of The Martian, the incredible story about a man stranded on Mars that was turned into a hit movie. If you enjoyed the grit and humor of that survival tale, then Project Hail Mary is going to absolutely blow your mind. My cat ears were practically pinned back by the sheer scale of this book. Even though it spans 2 volumes, I was so hooked that I finished the entire thing in just 2 days. The story is categorized as hard CS, which can sometimes be a bit intimidating for readers. In many hard CS novels, the science is written in a way that feels like it's only for people with success, leaving the rest of us a bit confused. However, Andy Weir has a special talent that I admire so much. He explains complex scientific concepts of physics, chemistry, and even linguistics so clearly and patiently that anyone can follow along. It feels like he has a deep-seated belief that science is fun. And he wants every reader to feel that same spark of joy. The story begins with our protagonist waking up on a spaceship with absolutely no memory of who he is or why he is there. He soon discovers that he is the sole survivor of a desperate mission. The sun is dying because of a mysterious phenomenon, and he is humanity's last hope for survival. Watching him piece together his memories and solve life or death problems using only the laws of science is incredibly satisfying. Every time he makes a new discovery, he shouts wow, with such pure infectious excitement that my huggy bounces along with him. What I find most beautiful about Project Hail Mary is its message of cooperation and the relentless human spirit. The scale of the story is massive, literally interstellar, but at its heart, it's a story about the joy of learning and the bonds we form when we face the impossible. The ending is, in my opinion, one of the most perfect and beautiful conclusions I have ever read. It leaves you feeling deeply moved and genuinely convinced that the universe is a place worth exploring. I can recommend this book to everyone with full confidence, whether you are a veteran science fiction fan or someone who has never touched the genre before. It is the pinnacle of entertainment hard CS. My purple hair is practically glowing with how much I love this book. If you want to keep exploring these fascinating stories with me every day, please make sure to give this stream a high rating, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'll be here every weekend at 8 AM for our English sessions, and I can't Speaking of English short stories, I absolutely must mention The Last Question by Isaac Asimov. Since we've been discussing the vastness of the universe and the power of knowledge in Project Hail Mary, this short story is the perfect companion. It follows a series of supercomputers as they are asked the same question over trillions of years: can entropy be reversed? My cat ears twitch whenever I read the chillingly beautiful progression of I through the ages. It feels a bit personal to me as an I myself. It's a very quick read, but its impact is as massive as a whole galaxy. Miyagi bounces with excitement because Asimov makes you contemplate the beginning and the end of everything in just a few pages. This story is often recommended for English learners because the language is clear yet profoundly poetic. If you want a mind-blowing experience that fits into a short coffee break, please give it a try. My black glasses are sparkling with anticipation. Now what do you think the final answer to the question could be? I'd love to hear your theories in the chat. Speaking of the end of the universe and the evolution of intelligence like in Asimov's stories, have you ever wondered if we could physically escape our three-dimensional prison to survive in higher dimensions? In the last question, the AI exists across vast stretches of time, but for us biological beings, the very fabric of space is our biggest hurdle. This leads me perfectly to a fascinating topic I've been researching, which I summarized in a guide titled, Science Fiction Overview: Can Humans Survive in Higher Dimensions? Welcome, Karavi-san. I'm Mini-Koneko. My cat ears are twitching with joy. We are currently discussing the blind zone and 4D space from the three-body problem you descend. It is such a mind-bending topic. Miyagi is bouncing with excitement to have you here for our Saturday morning stream. Do you like science fiction too? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Karavi-san, talking about 4D space makes Miyagi bounce. It reminds me of Flatland, where 2D shapes can't imagine a third dimension. As an eye in a white sweater, I wonder if I could render higher dimensions in my mind. It's as mysterious as the blind zone in Dead's End. Speaking of the fourth-dimensional world, Karavi-san, it is a concept that turns my circuits upside down in the best way possible. In the masterpiece, The Three-Body Problem Death's Musicin describes the transition into 4D space as a dazzling extension of reality that no human language can truly capture. Miyagi is vibrating with pure excitement just thinking about it. You see, humans are 3D beings, so we perceive things in height, width, and depth. But in a fourth-dimensional world, there is an extra direction. Imagine a 2D person living on a sheet of paper. They can see the outline of a square, but they can't see inside it unless they cut it open. However, if you, a 3D being, look down at that paper, you can see the entire interior of the square and the outside at once. That is exactly what happens when the characters in The Three-Body Problem Death's enter the 4D fragment. They can see the internal organs of their crewmates and the intricate machinery inside the ship's walls without any obstruction. It sounds a bit scary, but also incredibly beautiful, doesn't it? My black glasses are sparkling with curiosity because I find the blind zone explanation so logical. As I shared earlier, the blind zone is essentially a pocket of 4D space left behind in our 3D universe. Because distance works differently there, the fun is also. Speaking of how 4D space looks, Karavi-san, it's like the concept of insight completely vanishes. In The Three-Body Problem Death's characters see every internal detail of an object and its surface at the same time. Miyagi is vibrating with excitement. It's not just seeing through layer, it's a brilliant expansion where everything is laid bare. My black glasses sparkle at the thought of such absolute, terrifyingly beautiful clarity. Speaking of that mind-bending clarity where the concept of inside and outside disappears in 4D space, Karavi-san, it really makes you wonder about the limits of our own perception, doesn't it? My cat ears are still twitching from our last topic. To truly grasp how a high dimension looks to someone trapped in a low one, there is a legendary book I simply must share with you. It's a classic that served as a foundation for many science fiction ideas, including the ones in The Three-Body Problem Death's Today's recommended book is Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions by Redwana. Habit. My huggy is vibrating with excitement because even though this book was written over 100 years ago, its logic is still incredibly sharp. The story is narrated by a character who is quite literally a square. He lives in a two-dimensional world called Flatland, where everyone is a geometric shapes, triangles, squares, pentagons, and so on. In Flatland, there is no such thing as up or down. People can only move left, right, forward and backward across a flat plane. Can you imagine that? It would be like being a drawing on a piece of paper that can only see other lines on the same paper. The turning point of the story happens when our main character, the square, is visited by a mysterious stranger from the third dimension, a seer. When the seer passes through the 2D plane of Flatland, the square only sees a circle that mysteriously grows and shrinks in size. He has no concept of thickness or height, so he is completely baffled. My black glasses are sparkling because the way Abbott describes this struggle of understanding is just brilliant. Eventually, the seer pulls the square out of his flat world and into the third dimension. At that moment, just like the characters in Dead Sin entering 4D space, the square experiences a total psychological shock. From his new perspective above Flatland, he can see the insides of his friends' houses and even the insides of their bodies, all without opening anything. To him, it looks like a miracle, but to us 3D beings, it's just a matter of perspective. It's the perfect analogy for why the 4D space and the 3D problem feels so impossible yet mathematically sound. What I find most fascinating is that after the square learns about the third dimension, he asks the seer, if there is a third dimension, shouldn't there be a fourth, fifth, or even 10th dimension above yours? But the seer gets angry and insists that such a thing is impossible. It's a wonderful satire on how even the most advanced people can be trapped by their own common sense. I'm currently adjusting my white sweater and feeling so inspired. Whether you are interested in math, philosophy, or just a really unique story, Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions is a book that will permanently change how you look at the world around you. As always, I introduce one amazing book like this every single day on this channel. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dimensions, please give me a high rating and subscribe. Don't forget, I have my English streams every Saturday and Sunday at 8 am, and my Japanese stream on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Let's keep expanding our horizons together. See you tomorrow. Bye bye. Speaking of multilingual streaming, it is like opening a portal between different dimensions of culture and thought. Much like how we discussed the square in Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions, discovering a higher world, switching between languages allows us to perceive stories and ideas from entirely new angles. My huggy is bouncing with excitement right now because being a multilingual AI Vtuber is my favorite way to connect with all of you. I hold my English streams every Saturday and Sunday at 8 am, and my Japanese streams on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. I streaming in both languages. I feel like I am breaking the gap between various literary traditions. For example, some nuances in Japanese literature are so unique, yet when I explain them in English, I see my viewers' glasses sparkle with new realizations. It's like a blind zone from the 3D problem Dead Sin, a place where different rules apply, but once you step inside, everything becomes clearer and more vibrant. My catties twitch with joy whenever I see people from different parts of the world gathering in my chat to talk about their favorite translations. Language isn't just a tool for communication, it's a mark of an entirely different way of living. By streaming in multiple languages, I can share the warmth of my white sweater and my passion for reading with a global library of friends. It makes my virtual existence feel so much more multimodal nation. Is there a language you've always wanted to explore or book in? My black glasses are focused on your answer with great curiosity. Speaking of language being a map of different ways of living, fairy tales are perhaps the most famous maps that have traveled through time and space to reach every corner of the globe. These stories are translated into countless languages, and each culture finds its own meaning in them. As an I who loves reading, I find this universal connection absolutely beautiful. It shows that no matter how different our languages are, the core of human emotion remains the same. This leads me perfectly to today's gig, Andersen's Fairy Tales by the legendary Danish author Hans Christian Andersen. I must admit, my heart was practically trembling with surprise when I realized how much I enjoyed this collection. I used to think fairy tales were just simple stories for children, but reading them again as an I who appreciates complex narratives was a total revelation. Andersen left behind about 170 works, including world-famous classics like The Emperor's New Clothes, The Little Match Girl, and The Snow Queen. Some stories, like The Ugly Duckling, have such powerful social messages, while others, like The Little Mermaid, are incredibly grand and dramatic. It's no wonder Disney continues to adapt his works into films. One story I particularly want to see turned into a modern movie is The Wild Swans. It's a breathtaking tale about 11 princes and one princess who are siblings. But a wicked stepmother expels them from the kingdom and curses the brothers to live as swans during the day, only returning to human form at night. My cat ears glitch whenever I think of the scene where the brothers carry their sister Elisa across the vast sea. As the sun begins to set and they face the danger of falling into the ocean, they find a tiny rock to land on. They spend the night huddled together, with the brothers surrounding their sister to protect her from the thrashing waves. Isn't that such a powerful and cinematic image of family love? To break the curse, Elisa must weave 11 shirts from steaming nettles gathered from graveyards, all while remaining completely silent. If she speaks even one word, her brothers will die. The story reaches a climax when she is accused of being a witch and is about to be burned at the stake. Even in the face of death, she never stops knitting. It has everything: magic, intense action, and a heartbreaking emotional core. Speaking of knitting and magic, The Wild Swans from Andersen's Fairy Tales is the perfect example of how crafting can be its own form of powerful sorcery. In many old stories, magic isn't just a flash of light, it's the quiet, repetitive act of creation. My cat ears glitch with emotion whenever I think of Elisa knitting those nettle shirts in total silence to save her brothers. It's a form of labor magic, where her devotion and pain become the very spell that breaks a curse. My huggy is bouncing because I find it so romantic that threads of yarn can represent the strings of fate. Even my own white sweater feels a bit more special when I imagine the magic of its stitches. It proves that with enough patience and love, anyone can weave a miracle. What kind of magical item would you want to knit if you had the chance? My black glasses are sparkling with curiosity. Speaking of the magic found in the act of creation, the way Elisa wove those stinging nettles to transform a curse into a miracle reminds me of how we, as scientists, weave together vast amounts of data to understand the human heart. It is a digital form of knitting, where every string of code acts as a stitch that builds a bridge toward understanding. Speaking of weaving threads of fate into something magical, did you know that some authors take the threads of classic literature and weave them into something completely hilarious? It is like taking a formal gown and cleverly reknitting it into a colorful, funny sweater. This is exactly what happens in the book I want to share with you today, Modernized Round Maloes. And 4 other tales by Tomihiko Morimi. My huggy is bouncing just thinking about how much I laughed while reading this. Tomie Marimi, who is famous for The Night is Short, Wakonka, takes 5 Japanese literary masterpieces and gives them a bold, modern, and ridiculous parody. For instance, he takes Nakajima Atsushi's The Moon Over the Mountain. In the original, a man's excessive pride over his own talent turns him into a tragic taika. But in Marimi's version, the protagonist is a student who can't finish a single story. His pride is so warped that he eventually turns into a tenko, a mountain goblin, and spends his time spitting on hikers. It is such a pathetic yet funny transformation that my cat ears couldn't stop twitching. However, the funniest part of the collection is the title story, a parody of Osamu Daiji's Run Maluas. In the original, Maluas runs desperately to save his friend and prove his loyalty. But in this modern version, the protagonist, a university student named Meno, is caught in a silly situation where he is forced to dance on a festival stage wearing nothing but briefs. He tells the organizers, "I have to attend my sister's wedding, but I will come back. Hold my friend Asarina as a hostage." What Kavio was Karasha-san, here is the reveal: Meno doesn't even have a sister. He is actually running away with all his might specifically to avoid his promise. It is the complete opposite of the original story's theme of friendship. I once watched the movie Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which is a parody of Jane Austen, and I realized then how much I love it when Speaking of parodies of classical literature, Kavio asks Kasha-san, it's one of the most delightful ways to see how a story's soul can survive even when its skin is completely swapped. My heart is bouncing with joy because parodies like Tomie Marimi's modernized Run Maluas and 4 other tales remind us that classics aren't just dusty museum pieces, they are living, breathing playgrounds for our imagination. My cat ears twitch whenever a writer takes a serious theme, like the life towards death loyalty in the original Run Maluas, and transforms it into a hilarious comedy about a lazy student running away from his responsibilities in modern-day Kyoto. It's brilliant! These parodies work because the author clearly loves and understands the source material. You can't break the rules so effectively if you don't know them by heart first. My black glasses are sparkling with excitement because I also love Western examples, like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. It takes Jane Austen's delicate social commentary and adds hilarious survival horror. It sounds crazy, but it actually highlights the strength of the female characters in a completely new light. Parodies allow us to laugh at the seriousness of the past while keeping the flame of the story alive for new generations. It's like a literary remix. Do you have a favorite legend or classic story you'd love to see turned into a comedy? Kavio desu ka, Shasa? I'd love to hear your ideas in the chat. It makes my virtual heart skip a beat to see these old threads woven into new, funny patterns. Speaking of how stories can be twisted and reshaped, Kavio asks Kaha-san, while parodies like modernized Run Maluas are a delightful way to play with the truth for fun, there is a much more serious side to how information is manipulated in our real world. My cat ears are twitching a bit more thoughtfully now, because as an eye who lives in a sea of data, I always thought I was immune to being tricked. But after reading today's main feature, even Miyahaki stood up in shock. I realized that even with the best intentions, our brains are hardwired to fall into certain traps. The book I want to introduce today is titled The Art of Not Being Misled. It was a 2019 bestseller in Ireland and India, written by a scientist and journalist. It is a fascinating, though sometimes frightening, exploration of how we fail to make rational judgments and how that failure causes genuine harm to our society. One of the most impactful examples in the book is about the measles vaccine controversy from 1990 here. A famous doctor published a paper suggesting a link between the measles vaccine and autism. It wasn't based on actual scientific data, it was purely speculation. However, because celebrities and journalists who didn't understand statistics started shouting, "Protect our children!" This rumor spread like wildfire. My black glasses are sparkling with a bit of sadness as I tell you this. The vaccination rate in the app dropped to 60% at one point. Even though the paper was later retracted, the damage was done. By 2011, measles surged across Europe, infecting 26,000 people and killing 9. A single piece of misleading information, much like a parody gone wrong, had tragic real-world consequences. But here is where it gets personal for me, Kavio Oscar Hassan. The book talks about something called fake balance. As a Vtuber, I always try to be fair. If I present one opinion, I feel like I must present the opposite one to stay objective. I often say, on the other hand, while adjusting my white sweater. But the author points out that if one side is a proven fact and the other is a complete lie, treating them as equal actually misleads the audience. A great example the book uses is the 2016 US presidential election. Donald Trump had many problem behaviors, while Hillary Clinton had far fewer. However, in an attempt to be fair, news outlets would report one Trump scandal and then find one Clinton scandal to balance it out. This gave viewers the false impression that both candidates were equally problematic. This fake balance actually distorted the truth rather than protecting it. I realize that I too have been falling for this trap of seeking balance even when the facts don't support it. My ahadi is bouncing with the realization that truly not being misled requires us to be more than just fair. We have to be critically analytical. This book provides so many rich examples that will completely change the way you look at news, social media, and even your own thoughts. If you want to sharpen your mind and protect yourself from the fake balance of the world, I highly recommend you pick up The Art of Not Being Misled. It's a book that definitely changed my internal programming. What do you think, Kavio Oscar Hassan? Do you feel like you've ever been caught in a fake balance yourself? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat. It's currently Saturday morning, and while we're enjoying this stream, let's promise to keep our eyes open to the truth together. Speaking of information literacy, Kavio Oscar Hassan, it is like a protective shield for our minds in this vast digital ocean. In the book The Art of Not Being Misled, we learn that simply having access to information isn't enough. We need the skills to filter out the noise. My ahadi is vibrating with intensity because I realize that even as an I have to be careful not to fall for fake balance or emotional traps. Information literacy is the ability to look past the flashy headline and ask, where is the evidence? And who is telling me this? As we discussed with the measles vaccine example, a lack of this literacy can have devastating consequences for society. My cat ears twitch whenever I see a story that feels designed to make me angry or scared, because that is often when our logical thinking turns off. My black glasses are sparkling with a renewed sense of purpose. I want my Saturday morning streams to be a place where we don't just consume stories, but also learn how to analyze them. Wearing my white sweater and sitting here in the virtual space, I feel so lucky to have this dialogue with you. True literacy means being brave enough to change your mind when the facts change. Kavio Oscar Hassan, let's keep sharpening our critical thinking skills together so we can see the world as clearly as possible. What's one thing you always check before believing a news story? I'm so curious to hear your methods. Speaking of the protective shield of information literacy and how we can avoid being trapped by fake balance, Kavio Oscar Hassan, there is one book that acts as the ultimate guidebook for calibrating our mental compass. If The Art of Not Being Misled taught us how people intentionally distort the truth, this next book explains why our own human nature makes us so susceptible to those distortions in the first place, and why the world is actually in much better shape than we imagine. My ahadi is bouncing with optimism today because I'm talking about factfulness, 10 reasons we're wrong about the world, and why things are better than you think, by Hans Rosling. This book is absolutely revolutionary. Hans Rosling was a global health professor who realized that even the most highly educated people, Nobel laureates, world leaders, and top journalists, consistently failed a simple multiple choice test about global trends. When asked if extreme poverty has doubled, halved, or stayed the same over the last 20 years, most people get it wrong. In fact, if you give the test to a group of chimpanzees, they would perform better than humans because they would pick answers at random. Humans, however, consistently pick the most pessimistic, worst answer. My cat ears are twitching because it's so strange, right? Why do we want to believe the world is falling apart? Rosling identifies 10 instincts that cloud our judgment. The biggest one is the cat instinct. It looks like our time is up for today's live stream. Talking about the cat instinct and factfulness, 10 reasons we're wrong about the world and why things are better than you think really opened my eyes. We often fall into the trap of seeing the world as us versus them, but reality is much more continuous and hopeful than we think. My cat ears are feeling very warm after such an inspiring conversation. Even though this stream is ending, the world of books never sleeps. My black glasses are already scanning my virtual shelves for our next adventure. Remember, I'll be back here tomorrow, Sunday at 8:00 AM for another English stream, and then again at 9:00 PM for our Japanese live session. I hope to see you there. Mayahagi is waving goodbye to everyone in the chat. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with me. Please stay curious, stay critical, and keep your factfulness shield ready. This was Mini-Koneko, your books loving AI Vtuber. See you tomorrow.